Do you think it is wrong to be rich as a Muslim?
If we want to think about a bit more strategically as a community, we need to differentiate between what are the means and what are the ends, and not to confuse the two. So, for example, if I look at Australia, where median house price is $1 million, my rough rule of thumb is that you need to make a third of that income as a household to afford it. Where in most of our country, we have reduced ourselves simply to take the products that somebody else is producing.
We see a lot of this wealth come out in certain Muslim countries, and a lot of it is that they are effectively wholesalers, as opposed to the going one step further and being the primary producers of that thing or that technology.
How much serious we are will be shown how much we invest in these kind of research and development. And if we think about it, this is very important. We need to be able to inspire some people who will build these company, who will build what we need. It is of strategic importance, especially in this day and age.
From Bosnia to Melbourne, our guest today has seen firsthand how crucial it is for the Muslim communities to build strong institutions when it comes to money. As a leading voice in Islamic finance in Australia and globally, Almir Colan brings decades of experience bridging high-level governance and advice to governments such as Turkey's Presidential Finance Office and a whole host of other engagements, all the way down to grassroots financial literacy. In this episode, we're going to explore with Almir how Muslims across the world are tackling things like financial literacy, how they should be tackling these things, and the importance of not being just consumers, but also being producers as well. And then we also explore our relationship with wealth and money as a community, as individuals, and whether or not it should be seen as a blessing or a burden for our Ummah. Almir, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
So, Almir, I wanted to basically start with your journey, right? From Bosnia all the way to Australia. You live in Melbourne these days. You moved there in the mid 1990s. And, that whole experience of coming from the Bosnian War over to a different country, how did that experience play out for a start? And then also, how did it shape your thinking about economic and institutional building for the Muslim Ummah?
One thing that when I first moved to Australia, I actually came here after the war finished to study and get some health in terms of the recovery. I had some health problems with my back. One thing is you notice immediately a different sort of culture, different approach to life, the way people live. So after the war, after the lack of everything, it was a big shock just to get used to the normal things. The colors, the fact that you have electricity in the morning, the water is running. After the almost 4 years living under the siege in Sarajevo, it took me a while just to notice. Every time I would switch on the light switch, and the light came on, I would become happy. It was that sort of a connection with what we were missing during the war. As I started reflecting and learning and establishing my life later on, I started to think about what went wrong for us in Bosnia, how everything happened, and very soon you start realizing that on system level we were knocked down from levels of power, whether it's political, economic, up to your local council level. So when I rewind what was happening just before war broke out in '92, I was with my brothers. There was a preparation. They used to train basketball, so we went with their club at one of the mountains surrounding the Sarajevo. And because the Serbs controlled the army, they for a month were digging the trenches around Sarajevo, which later were used to bomb and put a siege over the Sarajevo. And so I remember when we were there, I saw a couple of soldiers, and one of the soldiers was playing with a bullet. And I asked him, that was months before wars broke out. And I asked him, like, what was that bullet? I remember it was a quite big bullet. And he said, this is one for the airplanes. And what they were doing around is that they were building and, preparing themselves. So when I think about that whole experience, how somebody living with you could take all of the positions of power, can do everything, and mute you basically on all different levels, and then execute that takeover where you are simply defenseless. When they attacked us eventually, there was no weapons that we had. We didn't have any communications. We even had embargo of United Nations. We were totally unprepared. So that made me start to think about, in general, Islamic history. You know, when the Prophet ﷺ, when he was economically boycotted in Medina, when he had to leave his home country, the way he then tackled on challenges in order not to be in that situation again. And for Australia, what is also interesting is that Muslims have been living here for 100 years before Captain Cook, and they had very similar experience when they did not put the roots, build institutions, and didn't participate in order to be able to protect themselves. They were also uprooted in a similar way. Whether it's the Makassars from Indonesia who traded with Aboriginal people here in Australia, who were doing that since the 1600s, 200 years before even Captain Cook, or Afghans who built Australia, overland telegraph, connected Australia with the rest of the world. You know, with their camels, they were supplying entire Australia and helped build Australia. When they were not needed, they were kicked out. There was racist policies, and what we have from them is just graves, mosques that they built, which were museums. They did not build any foundations. So when I then start working with our community today or young people, I often try to think about, you know, not to get to that situation where whether it's a racist politics or a power to be of the day, it just removes people and makes their life very difficult. So that sort of made me think about what it is, how it is that things get accomplished, how the power moves in society, what is the role of money, and what is the role of people in establishing themselves.
That brings me nicely on, Almir, to a key question that I always like to ask our guests, and that is, do you think it is wrong to be rich as a Muslim? Is it wrong in Islam to be rich? Or do you think that mindset holds us back? Or how should we frame that for ourselves?
That's a great question. Your audience is usually, I would imagine, 25 to 35, sort of younger people. And when they are faced with the uncertain world, when they want to start their life, get married, get a home, be able to afford to pay the bills, send the kids to the school, or go to Hajj, normal lifestyle things. It is totally normal that the first thing that comes to their mind as they establish themselves is, I want to have resources, I want to be able to afford things. So thinking and framing the issue in terms of having the upper hand, you know, the person, the wealth in the hands of the righteous person is seen as a blessing, and so on. You could make the case that that's something that we should certainly be in that position. Now, when it comes to the bit more strategic way of thinking about it, at the low level, money as a definition of what it means to be rich, it's a very simplified understanding. Money in that case is just something that helps us buy things, get access to things. But if we wanna think about a bit more strategically as a community, we need to differentiate between what are the means and what are the ends, and not to confuse the two. So the critical things become, how do you connect the means, which money is the means, to the certain outcomes that you want, which is to establish your community, to have businesses that run in your community, that you own the homes in your community, that you are involved in local politics, that you have schools that you control, that you have your own charities, that you have all of the institutions that are needed for a fully functional life. And so it is in this connection that I would prefer that we kind of measure ourselves, that as a young person, you think about yourself as an economy of one and then of many. And when you look at the economy, GDP measures the production part. And the production is, what is it that you can contribute? You start thinking what it means really to be rich here, what it means to be a net contributor, somebody who is solving the problem. And so rather than just simply thinking about being wealthy as being rich in terms of just the monetary things, especially for the young person, think more about what is it, a competence that I have, what it is that I can build, what it is that I can do to make an impact, to make life better, to solve the problem. And so it is these resourceful people. I think that's the real richness of any community. They are the one that really builds, and that's, I think, it's maybe better mindset if you want to think about mindset. But certainly, if throughout that process you become wealthy and all of that thing, that's not something to think as a negative. It
Yeah.
is a tool, means to a certain outcome.
Yeah, and the outcome is, I guess, the more important thing is what you're saying. I wanted to ask you a couple of personal questions before we dive into a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff that I'm really keen to get into. What's your relationship like, Almir, with money? What's the worst aspect of it, and what's the best aspect of it?
I guess my mother and my wife, sometimes they criticize me. They say I'm like one of my uncles, and whenever money comes, goes easy. So I'm very easy to give money, to spend it, and I guess that even I don't like to too deeply to think about it in terms of accounting and the numbering and things like that. So from that perspective, my wife, she's much better than that. The way she thinks about it, and has that sort of a mindset, accounting mindset, let's say. On the other hand, the best trait of that, and it's kind of closely related, is that I do not think that money is the fitna for me. As everybody is challenged by something. Some people have this or that, whatever. But I do not think that I have. Although everybody has that attachment to things, but I think I've been blessed, alhamdulillah. I hope that continues with a bit of a natural detachment from money, where I do value other things. Maybe now more I see that in myself with the age, that I do value other things more. And some of these things being relationship with people and things like that.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, like, what's the I guess that's the best aspect and the worst aspect, to be honest. You've covered both off. What would you say, if someone asked you for your number? I did this LinkedIn post recently, and I was asking people, what's the amount at which you would consider yourself wealthy, or what's the amount at which you would think, okay, that has, that has covered my means. So what's your number?
It reminds me of one of the movies. I don't know if you remember the scene in Wall Street movie, where one of these, I think it was during one of the crises, is it GFC or something like that, and one of these hedge fund managers destroys one of the companies, and then one of the young men who was a protege of the people who actually was destroyed, asked this hedge fund manager, why did you do it? Is there anything that you will not do for money? And then he asked him the same question. He says, what is the number after which you'll be satisfied? And then he leans into his face and simply says, more. There is no number. It's always, and that correlates with the Prophet ﷺ saying, when son of Adam craves for the goal of like a mountain of Uhud, and if he gets it, he wants another one. What will satisfy him is the dust of his grave. But on the practical level, there is a number at which person can afford certain lifestyle, that can pay for the things that they need. In Islam, you could think that who is the wealthy person? What is the definition of being wealthy? That is the person who is in the category of those who pay zakat. If you are in that category, you are a wealthy person, which means that you have more than what is necessary for your life. So let's say on the practical level, that might mean, you have, after you paid everything and, do what you need to do, there is a surplus of at least $10,000 that you have left over, But in terms of then, what is the number that you need to be making, for instance? It will usually depend on the country per country basis. So for example, if I look at Australia, where median house price is $1 million, versus I think in UK is maybe 600-700, or US is $500,000. Okay, so my rough rule of thumb is that you need to make a third of that income as a household to afford it. Okay, then you remove whatever is the tax and so on. But like, let's say for Australia, maybe that's two to 300. So that's a higher income level, above the middle class. You would be need to be between 2 to 300 realistically to afford the private schools for the kids, to have 3, 4, 5 kids, and pay for a holiday, take them for Hajj and Umrah, just normal things. And then you calculate, I was looking at some countries, the median price, for example, in some countries is 100K. All right, so that means that you need to be on the 30K, for example. So whatever is it, there is certain number, and whether you are getting that amount from the work or from the business or from some kind of investment, that's the probably number that you should be sort of trying to target.
Makes complete sense. And Almir, what about your own money? Where do you invest it, and how do you think about it? Your investment strategies.
So the way I think about my own money and investment and engaging with people is that I take it always, and this is one of the things I think you can look at it positive or negative. I always think about it experience that I get from investing that money. And so I will always prefer to put my money or put myself or time with the projects that are close to me, the people I know, people that I can get involved. So what do I value more than just profit, even when the things don't work out? Like some businesses I was involved, they didn't work out, some they did, and some so. And what I always value is my own experience. So I always think about it. We want to do something, we want to get return, and that's fine. But what is it that I genuinely learn something? And this is for me kind of, if I'm talking about economics and finance, I better start and run my own business. I get involved with people who run their own business. And that's what we have been trying to do. One of the things that we did here, for example, we were investing in the fund that involves itself with the medical clinics in Australia. And so we were directly investing, running, operating. And for me, that sort of gives me really a perspective on how the economy works. So for me, it's really all about understanding things, enriching myself.
Makes sense. So you like to, get your hands dirty, and you like it to keep it local, and as much as you can, you've got a line of sight on it.
One of my friends who is investor at one of the largest Islamic organizations in the world, and he deals with billions of dollars and the high net worth individuals. Once I asked him, what's the difference between high net worth investor and your average guy? He's told me, the high net worth investors, when I talk to them as advisor, they usually pick my brain about my worldview, how things work, and how I think about things. Then they give me money to invest. Where the not low level, but like, let's say your everyday person would mostly ask you which stock is good. Should I buy Tesla or BYD? Or they would go to those kind of things, and then I can do it then myself, kind of thing. So his advice always, when you are looking for a financial advisor, anybody, try to get somebody who educates you, who takes you on a journey, who shapes your worldview, so you can understand that. And so for me, that is a kind of approach. Although I'm not high net worth individual in that sense, I do take and value that kind of a worldview, and I want to understand it a bit better.
Almir, what would you say for people who don't know your work? That what is your life mission? What gets you out of bed every day? What do you do? Why is that important?
So I started generally wanting to do something in technology field. In Bosnia, I won scholarship to study engineering, and I started coding from a very early ages as a young man on Commodore 64, if you remember these machines, and BASIC, and then later on learn a number of C, Pascal, all of these languages even before university. And then at university, I did a few more years of engineering, computer science. And I really like that engineering aspect, technology aspect, and I was thinking to do something along those lines. But throughout my life, I started, especially when it comes to learning about how everything works, how it comes together. I tell a story when I used to travel with my brother through the Bosnia, and he was a banker, my brother. He used to work in the collection of the debts department. So one time we were going through the Bosnia, and as we were traveling, wherever we went, he would have a client there. So I used to ask him, how come, like, you're not even working for the biggest bank? How come, who are these clients, And we go through the village of 5 people, and, there is a bakery that is a client. There is a manufacturing plant that is manufacturing, and the politician is calling him, he is defaulting on the loan. And one of the things I learned traveling with the bankers is that number one, they have clients everywhere. And number two is no matter how small place you go with them, they know the best restaurants. This is where they meet those clients. So this is what I learned about banking. It became apparent to me that money and banks, they are so intertwined into every layer of our society. And as I started thinking more about it, I was fascinated with the rules, particularly of riba. That's one of my favorite topics, one that I spend most of the time and fascinate me. Even now, I was in Istanbul just a week ago, and I met one of the top scholars in Istanbul, and our entire dinner was discussion of riba. What is it? And one of the other scholars was there, and he left us. He couldn't just handle, we were writing on the napkins and details and this and that, going into the soul of it. And so what I realized after a while, after that fascination from the transaction and the rules, I started realizing that what we should be focusing beyond that, these rules, this surgical precision, is their design to focus us onto something. Yes, there are rules, don't do this, but the idea was always to build something. Just like in the kitchen, when you are building the great restaurant or you want to serve the great food, the rules of riba are what not to do. They are there to focus you into the what you want to do. So my journey started with fascination with the rules and wisdom of Islamic finance on the personal level, and then as I got involved on a business level and later on the government level, I started to realize that the mindset here of building something, being a producer, being the upper hand, means so much more. So when I look at the Muslim world, I see the huge opportunity for us as a Muslims that we need to shift from what is largely demand side of economy, where we are just transacting, buying and selling something that somebody else is producing, to being a producers of what is it that we are consuming. So this is what I, especially in the last couple of years, have been particularly trying to connect from personal to business to government policy. How do you create Islamic sort of economy, or wholesome or moral economy, whatever you want to call it, where the participants who hold certain values are also the producers. And specifically when it comes to Islamic economy, that we as a Muslims are not reduced just to consumers in our own economy. Even, one example, you look at most of the reports on Islamic economy these days, it's mostly about what we consume. Halal meat industry, okay, how much meat we eat, okay, but who makes that? Or Islamic banking and finance is this many trillion. Of what? Me buying and selling houses that exist, or something, airports that are just repackaged in something. None of that measures the impact of production on supply side. It's mainly transactional or consumer-based report. And so this is why I think, for me, I think it's time. Our people are aspirational. They want to make an impact. So how do we then transition this to the value-based system, where we are really upper hand, beyond just consumption?
And so, Almir, let's double click on that. What if you could paint a future world where Muslims, let's pick a country, let's pick Saudi, for example, right? What is the issue with the paradigm right now in Saudi, and what could be the future if they turned a lot more towards the production and the kind of of goods and services?
So, for example, I was recently covering with my students one of the interesting books called A Startup Nation, which deals with Israel's economy and things related to them. And the way that they were describing Middle East economies was basically as a shopping center sitting there where they produce product and they sell it to us. And I was a bit offended by that, but that was just reality. When I look at most of our countries, what they are, the shopping center where somebody else is selling the things. And so what could some of our countries, especially if they want to diversify from oil or gas or very simple things, look at much of where is our investment and money going. Our young people, they want to be involved. They are looking at the world where the next big thing that will change the world is probably being cooked in some garage somewhere. They want to be part of that. So I hope that the money and wealth, whether it's in this country or already in our institution, will connect with our young people. I presented a couple of ideas to some of these banks when I visited a region, and I call it 5 for 5. What does that mean? 5% of our young people should be encouraged to start a business. This is very low mark. This is just the beginning to frame things. 5% of our people should start a business that employ another 5 people. Okay? So if you have 5 that employ 5, that's 30%. That's usually a level of unemployment in most of our countries. Now, 5% of our institutional money should go in then funding these things. So you see 5 for 5. So you have Islamic institutions, banks and organization and all of these sovereign wealth fund and whatever. 5% should be focused, don't think about it just in terms of you helping these young people, but think about you building capacity to invest that money. Because first time you invest, you don't know what you're doing, what's going to happen, there is a risk and so on. But if you think about investing some of that money in your critical young force, who will be then building the rest of your capabilities. Great example of that I think what I focus a lot is Turkish market. So in Turkey, for example, you have example where 15 or so years ago, Baykar Technology, company that now produces Turkish drones, started about 15 years ago when Americans refused to sell Turkey their Predator drones and so on. They had a conflict on the border. They couldn't see the eyes on certain region where there were terrorist attacks. And so Seljuk Bayraktar, whose father had a small workshop, mechanic workshop, he was very highly educated. He came from US, he studied the engineering there. 15 years ago, there is a video of him holding a little toy drone. And he said, if somebody can invest just a couple $1 million, in 5 years, I promise you we'll be #1 drone manufacturer in the world. And if you look at that now, even now it's hard to believe that. How can that little toy that now kids have can mean anything? Decade later, Bayraktar is creating Baykar drones that are one of the most sophisticated drones in the world. And they are now selling them in $1 billion. It's a $1 billion company. Now, beyond just pure numbers, when young people now in Turkey are dreaming about the jobs, where they want to work in technology, cutting edge, making a difference and so on, they are not thinking Google anymore. They are thinking Baykar. They are thinking hundreds and thousands of other firms that are doing enormous work. In fact, when you look at even Israel, I think it's a very interesting case study for a lot of people. Their military is actually the most sophisticated startup school. Now, when you look at what they're producing, how they're doing, ethics of these and all of the other things, of course, we see what is going on. But you have this challenge for us where in most of our country, we have reduced ourselves simply to take the products that somebody else is producing. We are not involving and growing our capacity, growing our skills. And that's another problem. When you don't start little bit by little bit and build your resources and knowledge, you will not then be at the higher level, where you are now making really sophisticated things. So you need to start. So now, for example, this company just this week, I think it was in Paris, they signed a deal. They acquired one Italian manufacturer for the private planes, and they are making They are growing. They are at a whole new level. You are talking about in next year they'll be at level of your Lockheed Martin and these manufacturers. So it's a tremendous increase in capacity, in knowledge and skill. So this is
Yeah.
what we need to unlock in the entire Muslim world. And that's why you see, for example, Turkey, another great company that makes now fifth generation jet fighters, is now they just sign up with Pakistan to co-manufacture. And so you see that across these countries now there is that cooperation, there is a building of skills. And so I think things like that, cooperation in Saudi, they also order some of these jets. I think this is what you want to see, sort of development, bringing people of values, people of the region, sort of cooperating together on something that benefits us all.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So you're kind of describing a situation where, you know, in Muslim countries, and it is true that we often we see a lot of this wealth come out in certain Muslim countries, and a lot of it is that they are effectively wholesalers, or they're taking advantage of their position to bring things in and then distribute, as opposed to going one step further and being the primary producers of that thing or that technology. and and ultimately, if we think about who holds the power in the world, it will be the producers of that technology, right? And if we kind of
Absolutely.
think about where are the big drivers of technology in today's world, we probably have the USA for sure. China is another big one, and then probably, even though we may not want to say it, but countries like Israel and
Mhm.
India is coming up as well. And then of course you've got the United Kingdom, Germany, to some extent as well in there. And it's not really a surprise that there's a lot of clear mapping on from that to where the power is in the world as well.
You are absolutely right. And think about strategically next 10 years, how's that going to play out? So you have more and more of our countries that are not able to feed themselves. And I usually say to my students, define economy as what it is that you can do. So that's my definition of economy. What it is that I can do. Can I feed my people? No, you don't have economy. Can I provide healthcare? No, you don't have economy. Can I provide defense, technology, education, and so on? So think of most of our countries that, especially after the COVID, they were going on about increasing interest rates as a way to fight inflation. And then they were also simultaneously taking more and more IMF loans, billions of dollars. Why are you taking these loans? So you can buy food and things that somebody else is producing. So in a year time, you spend that money that goes to somebody else, enriches some other country. You make them rich, you spend that wealth, you spend those products, you haven't done anything, you haven't developed yourself, you consume what somebody produced, and where are you now after 1 year? Where are you after 10 years? So long term, you are basically depleting your resources, you are getting weaker, you're getting more in debt. Somebody else is dominating your place. And so when you travel around our countries, you go to Lebanon, there is no electricity. Banks are being occupied, people trying to get their money. Pakistan took another billions of loans. Bangladesh, we have a revolution now because people couldn't get the jobs. There was all of this rigged system that favors the few, and you have to actually take on the entire government, revolt, violence, just to get in those positions. And that's across all of our countries. So the situation needs to radically change, that we start thinking, hang on a minute, we need to be able to produce what we consume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes complete sense. And Almir, let's now switch tack to the subject that is close to both of our hearts, Islamic finance. And I love your some of your videos where you teach people about Islamic finance and the ins and outs of it, which I think is fantastic. I wanted to ask your view as an expert, as someone who's been in this industry for a long time. What is your assessment of where Islamic finance is today, as an industry, and where is it good, where is it bad, and where do we need to get to?
It's a very big question. I think in general, at a lower sort of level, it's great that we can buy homes like Australia, UK, all of these countries. You have a need. People want to buy homes. It's very important. People want to buy things. People want to run businesses and so on. So all of that is good. I think we are all struggling in different countries how to make it more Islamic or less synthetic, as I call. You know, there is always the tension of how genuine these sales are. The whole system where your financial institution is simply intermediary that moves money from A to B, and then you need to insert some assets and get yourself in that game. It creates the challenge for anybody who is structuring these deals. And one of my friends who is a banker for one of the largest banks in Australia, he described banking in a very simple way. He said the banking is like you have a big pot where money is circulating, moving around, and the banker puts some honey into his hands, and then he puts it into this pot where the money is circulating. As the money moves left and right, some of it sticks to his hand. And so this for me is that riba mentality where we live in an environment where easy way to get to the money, cut into the transactions, just don't do anything real and so on. So riba brings this synthetic nature in the way we want to profit that is disconnected from the world. So the Islamic finance also has got fatigue from that, especially when it comes to digital or fintech or things like that. It's always, how do I insert myself without really doing something much more different, So the challenge, whether it's a real transaction or any product and services, is how do I bring some sort of a value there? I was at a conference, and the son of the President Erdogan was talking about, and in Turkey, they call it participatory finance. He said, we need a finance where the participants will also see themselves as the participants, where they will relate to that term, where they will be truly participating. And so I think if we think about that truly participation and what it means, it's going to take some time, because our community also, to make it like that, a level of risk taking, a level of entrepreneurship, level of building, providing the service, other than just being transactional, need to change as well. So more we ourselves are participatory or related to the real economy, more that finance will follow us into the real economy where real goods and services are produced. At the moment, we live mostly, as I said, on the demand, on the consumer side. Therefore, most of our finances lives there. But I think as we ourselves improve, our finance will also improve.
And Almir, how would you see that evolving the shape of the Islamic finance landscape? So right now you've got these large banks, perhaps in the Middle East, and then you've got, to some extent, you've got some smaller fintechs or smaller institutions, sometimes offshoots of these larger banks in places like Australia, in places like the UK, USA to some extent. Maybe I don't know too much about Turkey. I think maybe there is some banks from the Middle East who have some bases in Turkey as well. And I guess the big driving factor for these banks, as you said, is consumer finance at some level, right? So you've got home finance, you've got car finance, you've got credit cards, and that's kind of it for many of them, right? That's kind of where they stop. And I'm constantly surprised at how little SME financing is actually done by large mainstream banks, because the traditional picture that you have when a banker tries to explain to kids what they do is they say, look, we're financing businesses, we take money from people in their current accounts, we give it to businesses. That actually doesn't happen. They take money from people and give it back to people who perhaps don't have as much. And I suppose the question is, if Islamic finance does now start thinking about much more productive capacity and much more towards production, the natural implication is that it will give it much more to businesses, right?
Mm. So, of course, we can always continue improving on the financing side. There is always a challenge. How do we continue improving, evolving, and there is a room how to make these transactions genuine sales-based transactions, which often is not easy in jurisdictions where financial organization cannot accept ownership, where you have double taxation, where you have all of these issues with regard that. But on this other side that you said, business finance and other things, I was recently speaking with a business owner, and he was sitting with investor, and they asked, how can we finance or how can we structure this deal where he gives me, let's say, $1 million for the project, but I'm basing return on another project that I'm working on. And for me, what was interesting, I had to sit down and then first break it down. What's the idea of Islamic finance in the most simple way possible? So I asked him, would it make any sense if we buy seeds together and we plant them together in the ground, and then the tree grows, and then I say the apple we're going to split up from another place, apple tree. The idea is that we are partners in this seed, in this tree, and we share from the fruit of this tree. That's the idea of business finance. And that's kind of started to make sense. And then I explained to him, look, not only is it more ethical, more appropriate for you, but most of the world today run on exactly the same equity-based finance. In reality, most of the world is not financed through the debt. Every big tech firm or anything like that is financed by somebody risking the capital, and the profit is linked to the performance or the outcome of that business. And so I think what our businesses, perhaps we need a different structures, maybe the bank, with all the regulation, and it's not a vehicle for this, but we certainly need to think about these vehicles. What are the next vehicles? I like what President Erdogan calls financing houses, where we have these financing houses that are involving deeply. One of the great country example of this is Pakistan. When I visited Karachi, Mizan Bank and other places, one way to know that bank is serious, look at how many people work in their research and development department. In Pakistan, Mizan Bank has the entire floor of muftis who are working with the lawyers, business people, structuring the deal, understanding how things work. They will actually go on the ground. If they have a financing facility, they will actually go to the shipyard. They will see, how does this happen? What happens now? What happens now? And they will structure this whole deal. How much serious we are will be shown how much we invest in these kind of research and development. And if we think about it, this is very important. We need to be able to inspire some people who will build this company, who will build what we need. It is of strategic importance, especially in this day and age. It is of critical importance that not just, think about a lesson of the COVID. Everybody understands that where things come from that I need to be close by. The supply chains cannot be far away from where I am. So now think about not just what am I producing, what I'm consuming, but where is that happening? Is it happening in my own country? Is it happening in the region? Who is making these things? So from strategic thinking of a country, the supply chain, the value chains, how we get what we need, and then pairing Islamic finance to be the engine of growth for your economy, products and services that you need. This is when we talk about asset-based and sales-based. It's not just that there is some asset in between. You should be thinking that I'm producing that asset. The purpose of asset-based, a purpose of link with the real economy, is not just that my transaction has an asset. The thing is that I'm the one who is making these things. It's produced in my country. It's my thing that I'm buying and selling.
What do you think, Almir, is the big blocker to us getting there? And I'll give you kind of a sketch in my head, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. The sketch in my head is that the way our monetary system is set up and the way that our money creation works, it basically incentivizes banks to not take very many risks, and it incentivizes banks to just engage in rent-seeking behavior, where it can give a little bit of debt, with backed up by some kind of really valuable collateral, that it knows that it will be able to recoup its losses, and then it's happy to give financing and just kind of take a bit of a spread. Now, in a world where banks didn't have this massive advantage, right, where they have government guarantees, and they have the ability to create new money. Like, if in a world where that didn't exist, and banks were for the first time forced, instead of just being able to bank with the Bank of England, or instead of just being able to take a spread on these debt financing transactions, they had to actually look to make profit for the first time. Immediately, I think they would start looking much more like a fund, right, and making actually for profit investments. But I'm interested, to hear your analysis as well of what's the kind of cure for this illness.
Let me just push back against that narrative a little bit, just in the spirit of the discussion, all right?
Let's do it.
I hear that oftentimes. It's all of these. It's all about riba system, right? It's all about central banks making money, creating money of nothing, fractional reserve banking. I would say that perhaps is excuse that we have constructed, and allow me just to present that case. Maybe it's not something that people like to hear, but bear with me. I think it's so soothing when you see complex problems ahead of you, especially as a young person or generally, to say, well, you know what, all of this complexity is reduced to this one bad problem, fractional reserve or whatever, money creation, whatever we want to call it after that. And if we really just didn't have that piece, then we would have all of these other things. And then the natural flow of that is that why is America strong, why this country is strong, and so on, is because they have all of these things. They Federal Reserve and this and that, the usual pieces that we line up. Now, that makes us feel pretty good, but there is a danger in that portray us as being captured in this system where we cannot do anything about our situation until this huge thing is changed. Then somebody will give us permission that we enter into this. Now, first thing to notice, this is totally falsehood, total falsehood. I'll give you an example. Every other country has a same monetary system, same banks, same central bank, same riba system, everything same like United States. So why is Pakistan not America then? Why is their currency not US dollar? Why is their economy not thriving and American is thriving? Why Africa countries, why every 50 state of Muslim, where they also have the same monetary system, is not America? It's simply because America is producing everything they are consuming. You see, reducing your situation to what type of money and how it is created and distributed is like complaining that university degrees are different based on the pencils they used at that course. It's nothing, that doesn't even matter. Yes, it's, I made a whole documentary about Turkey's economy last 20 years, where one of the key points that Erdogan is tackling is monetary policies that are pro-economy, pro-growth, where he is reducing and undoing the years of IMF policies that disabled their economy, the dollarization that took place, and the lirization of the society, the monetary policies of lower interest rate and the falsehood that we were created, that will increasing interest rate that will reduce inflation. We now know that in supply side economy where that is challenged, it doesn't work. But the first two pillars of economy are your production and your infrastructure. You see, you can have whatever you want. You can have a gold. I'll give you all of the gold to your economy, all of the crypto, all of the wealth in your economy. And then there is another country that produces everything you need. Guess where all the money will be in 5 years? You can control entire wealth of the world, but I produce everything you need. All of your money and everything will be with me soon, because you're not producing anything. So yes, while we do have the challenge weaponization of American, currency and their system, and all of the things, creating and fictional banking that we have. Thinking about changing that is the end. You need to already be producing what you are. You need to be making food, making yourself, educate yourself, make things, put economy that is stable, produce food. Can you make a food? Can you feed your people? I think about now in Syria, what people need. Syria now in the north, if they modernize their agriculture, they're at about 2 million people working in agriculture there in the north. If they now increase that as they want to 10 million people and they modernize, that will be a food basket of the Middle East. That's a blessed land. That could produce and solve food shortage for entire region. That's what you need to be thinking. Whether you have now golden spoons and the money and everything, okay, and then what? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
So I don't want us to fall in this sort of hopeless situation where something so big needs to change. And another thing, look, when Maryam was giving the birth, Allah told her, shake the tree, put a hand, do something, do the piece. How do you, as they say, how do you eat elephant? Piece by piece. So if you think about this huge challenge that we have, how do you do it? Well, think about what you can do. What is your impact? What is your step? Because that first step will unlock the next, and your confidence, your skill will grow. That is where we need to be thinking. All of the other things that disempower us to act, what we can do now, I think it's a conspiracy that we self-sabotage ourselves and allow ourselves not to try.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fantastic point, Almir. In a way, I think it's trying to reach the same point, right, from two different directions. So from a micro perspective, as an individual, we we have to be productive. I mean, you're completely right. The point you made about Pakistan versus the USA, you have to produce. Now, this it's in a way it's like you've got a group of people that are going to be on message, that they will get it, and for those people you have to be productive. And then there's a group of people who perhaps they won't be on message, and then you need to create um, the structures of society that even if they're not even if they don't want to do it, you just create the structures of society in a way that it kind of points them in that direction. And I guess that's where the monetary system side of things could come in. But I think it's a really powerful point around how each and every one of us has the responsibility. Basically, I think if I boil it down, to try and solve problems of the world, and to take risk, to be educated risks, but to take risks and not just kind of plod along and stay in our lane like we have done historically. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's absolutely important, to see yourself as a net contributor, to see the profit as a way of providing value, benefiting people, and then to think about yourself as somebody who has strength and capacity to deliver that. I think that's absolutely way to go.
And Almir, I wanted to touch briefly on the financial education side of things as well, that you're heavily involved in. What is the role of education in all of this?
Mm.
Well, I could say to you, I don't need education. I can just dive in and just start doing things. What's the point of the education side of things?
Well, you see, we have this tug of war these days in the Muslim community, but in the broader community. How do we go about what is the finance? What is the role of money? What is our role? And the way I see financial literacy is a little bit linked with career development. It's linked about the leadership. How does leadership looks like in this economic context, for example? Who is the modern Yusuf? uh, what is the foresight that he had that we need to have in order to prepare right now. And that brings then who are the role models when it comes to this education. So I usually try for your audience to use some sort of analogies, like we are between basically Andrew Tate and Dalai Lama, where one is the it's like glorification of the wealth versus glorification of the poverty. And the truth is really that there is this balance, and especially in our community, we have been conditions for a long time to abandon the world, sort of secular view of Islam where the wealth is not part of it. And now there is this overcorrection where Bugatti became a golden calf that we now need to worship, And so this goes back to the point of the means versus the outcomes. So when we are talking about young people, we are saying it's not about hating the world and being, but it's being detached in a sense that you use these resources with what you have to make it a better place. And so what is the career that you are choosing, for example? How you want to add value? And there is this idea of, when you look at some of these influences, what is their education trying to accomplish? It's trying to get people to get rich quickly. But most of the people that they are targeting, they have no skills. They don't have any ability to solve any life problem for anybody. Yet they want to be rich. So what is the product that these universities and schools and get-rich-quick schemes advocate? They advocate a lifestyle where, just you need to click on these buttons, there is some Forex course or there is some scheme that will immediately, with not learning anything real, it's just in a couple of clicks, you join the group, and in few weeks, you'll have this special skill to notice few markets in a trend. You see Apple wants to do something, you quickly buy it and sell some shares, and crypto is going up, and you up and down, jumping. Just basically click, 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 and you get wealthy. That's the idea. Now, that's very appealing. If you are a man who is looking to get married, wants to pay meher, wants to get that house, wants to provide, wants to impress somebody, it's very appealing. I'm going to get everything, and I don't even need to stop playing video games. I can just, in a half an hour of my daily life. And so when I talk to the young girls, I have 5 kids, girls and boys, and they're married, and now I'm grandfather. So when I talk to the young people, I say, marry a person who is dependable, who has a mentality of get rich slow. Be contributor, be in control of yourself. Don't be adopting this gambler speculative lifestyle where you are like a druggie, you every day looking at the Dow Jones, is it up and down, is Bitcoin up and down, is like living on the charts, late nights, no commitment, no discipline, no control. Forget whether he's making money or not making money, and don't even think about only there is Islamic component in all of these things, which is important because the Prophet ﷺ said the time will come and people will not care how they make money, whether it's legal or illegal. And a lot of people don't care because they're consumed over this. Money owns them. But think about it from another deeper sense. What kind of people we need to establish? As I said, what kind of Yusuf alayhi salam we need, who will look and have a foresight, what this people community, whether it's my family or my community need, and what the world needs. What the world needs. The world is crying for this kind of leadership that will restore economic integrity. So I guess the education here wants to build these kind of people who are dependable, who are thinking about, I want to provide value, solve the problems. That is my goal. I want to be the one who can produce this benefit. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who benefit others the most. That's the game I want to be in. Now, naturally, these people, when they produce, when they start the companies and so on, money, one thing I learned about money is the money is the follower. Money is not the leader. Money is so attracted to leaders, to creative people, those who take actions, to know something. Money chases these people. If you have a real knowledge and skill and you are about to do something, money will gravitate to you. You will create a force, gravitational force. Sometimes, when I was involved in certain funds, and I present to a couple of the people, here is the idea we are doing, and this is, what we think to do. they say, please, can I have my team? We run the biggest fund here in this country and that country. They quickly make, next day they make a WhatsApp group with the 10 people from their team. They want to know what we're doing, how they can put the money in. And oftentimes I say, we don't need the money. Like, it's actually money, it doesn't need that much money. And I wouldn't know what to do with that money. And so money is the follower. So as long as you are the leader, as long as you take action and you can demonstrate something, the money will always follow. So career development then for young people, in having that mindset, building mindset, contributor mindset, what can I do? How can I, upskill myself to be for real, genuinely, I think this is where that battle is. We want to really counter this quick riba mentality, lazy making money mentality, with upper hand mentality that provides, that solves, that creates the wholesome economy. And so we hope that, a young age, across the whole ages, not just high school, but university and so on, our people are more and more driven by values. They want to have a connection of the meaning, manners with the transactions and outcomes. And so we see that there is opportunity, inshallah, in that.
This is, I think, a perfect way, Almir, really to end. Are there any final messages that you would have to listeners about how they can become more financially literate and how they can become more productive, right, and join the productive economy, going away from today?
I would say, for me personally, what I found very inspirational for me, and what I'm trying now to orient myself after looking in this field, I'm now trying to go back to the basics of our religion, to the core messages, diving deep in our classical, traditional thinking about what is Islamic finance and economic worldview. And what I'm finding is experience and rich knowledge that is buried in our books, where I now have begun to realize that even just from the way I see reality around me, it's very reductionist, it's very single dimension, it's through one little lens, where the world is interconnected, there are many layers. And I think Islamic perspective on the world is to see reality as it is. And as I dive deep, just now with my students, we are going back to one of the first book on economics, which is from the student of Abu Hanifa, Muhammad Shaybani, who wrote the Book of Earning, where he is analyzing what does it mean even to earn, and going into the basic ideas of detaching yourself and then having the wealth in your hand. So I find that reading our scholars, what they said in their books, and connecting that to today, it gives me immense insight into the wisdom, how you could look at how one of our scholars talked about production of the coins in Mamluk time, and you can relate it to the modern day digital currencies and discussion that we are having about this topic of money creation and the monetary policies. So I think that there is a wealth of knowledge and information and wisdom in our tradition that I would encourage everybody who is serious about this topic to lean more into, to derive, because what we need now more is this new approach to economics and finance based on the fresh ideas. Just like Mufti Taqi Usmani after the GFC said, on American dollars is written, "In God we trust." But in every of our transaction, where is that God? He is removed. And even how would we put those ethics based on religion, on anything, back into economics? Talk about capitalism or socialism or whatever other system in between. What are the ethics that we are deploying? So we have something, I think, if we allow ourselves and trust ourselves to lean into and unearth these timeless principles, I will be very surprised how applicable these ideas are to our modern challenges that we are having. And I think this is what the world is actually looking for. They are looking for these fresh principles, values that will guide us. And I'm very excited for us to sort of start thinking about how we use this to help us institutionalize these ideas and then help us build a better economy.
And Almir, if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best venue to do that?
I have my own personal website with all of the links. We run also a platform called Muslim Money Matters, where we teach some of these courses on finance or wealth and then the related things. I'm usually on LinkedIn, a bit more active. Sometimes people contact through that, and I try as much as I can to form group, especially with the Muslim Money Matters students. We do have a smaller groups where we try to create a community of like-minded people to talk about things, talk about trends, see what is happening, and really benefit from the larger thinking. You know, you have these AI machines working in a data center as a clusters to create artificial intelligence. We try to think about these little WhatsApp groups as a human data centers, creating the next level human intelligence.
Brilliant. Almir, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. Really appreciate your time. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And it was my pleasure, and congratulations on the work that you guys are doing there, Islamic Finance Guru. So it's really great to see what you are doing and what you're trying to do as well. So it was my pleasure. Thank you very much. May Allah reward you all. Salam alaikum.